In Canada, you could legally hire and promote employees based on their ethnicity, gender, indigeneity, and physical ability. What's more, these traits can make the difference between an applicant being accepted to a Canadian university and another who's rejected. Over the course of this video, I will explain to you what that means, who it affects, and why this is true. Now, I've rewritten the script for this video because I want to present the information in a way that makes sense, so I won't bury the lead. The truth is that since the 1980s, some Canadian institutions and individuals have deliberately misinterpreted and misrepresented the meaning of equality by conflating it with equity for their own purposes. As a professional editor by trade, I don't appreciate when people play word games to confuse someone in a discussion. So, to simplify this video, I will use equality to mean equality of opportunity and equity to mean equality of outcome. In other words, people who advocate for equality judge on merit without considering group identity, whereas those who advocate for equity judge while factoring in group identity, be it gender, ethnicity, etc. In that sense, Martin Luther King Jr. was discussing equality, not equity, when he famously said, "I have a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Let's quickly examine one aspect of the American legal system that is vastly different from the Canadian one. In June 2023, the US Supreme Court, the court, declared race-based admissions at universities to be unconstitutional. Indeed, the court determined that Harvard University and the University of North Carolina had been admitting students of some races over others to achieve diversity in the name of equity. Indeed, those admission processes violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution. The key takeaway is that the right to equal protection cannot mean one thing when applied to one individual and something else when applied to a person of another color. Here, we are specifically referring to race/ethnicity, but there are other relevant identity groups in Canada that I will address shortly. In the court, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the decision for the court majority, saying that the nation's colleges and universities must use colorblind criteria in admissions. Quote, "Many universities have for too long concluded wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin." Unquote. Our constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. This is diametrically opposed to what has happened over the past 40 odd years in Canada. And we could turn to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Charter, to understand how the American definition of equality came to mean something different in Canada. Adopted in 1982, the Charter's Section 15.1 states, "Every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination and, in particular, without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability." So, the words of 15.1 describe a universal right for people to be treated equally regardless of who they are. However, Section 15.2 of the Charter provides exceptions against that very idea. It states, subsection 1 does not preclude any law, program, or activity that has as its object the amelioration of conditions of disadvantaged individuals or groups, including those that are disadvantaged because of race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age or mental or physical disability. In other words, Section 15.2 can override Section 15.1 in any situation where individuals or groups can benefit from special treatment. I know that sounds very general, and in real terms, it means that any law, program, or activity in Canada can unfairly discriminate based on ethnicity, religion, etc., as long as one can argue that it's for a good cause according to the legal system. Therefore, the pursuit of equality of opportunity, or equal treatment, shifted to equity, which is to say unequal treatment, and as we will soon see, affirmative action. Another term used in the Canadian legal context, to be clear, was substantive equality, which became the rule rather than the exception. Let's dive into real examples. Most provinces in Canada have commissions or tribunals that address human rights complaints in some capacity, and some of them implement affirmative action in ways that are explicitly discriminatory. For example, in June 2021, an Ontario high school student tried to sign up for a summer program. He was rejected because he was white. The Summer Up program, sponsored by the Ontario government, was open only to Black students. The student's father filed a complaint with the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal alleging racial discrimination. The tribunal dismissed the complaint because it declared that white people cannot claim discrimination. Quote, an allegation of racial discrimination or discrimination on the grounds of color is not one that can be or has been successfully claimed by persons who are white and non racialized. Similar to the Charter, the legal explanation provides exceptions to actual equality, as shown here. Clearly, some identity based discrimination is fully accepted by these commissions and tribunals, but here are a few more examples to expand on the principle. The Canadian media has recently covered the new medical school at Ryerson's, or Toronto Metropolitan University, and its admissions policy that stated that it reserves 75% of its seats for Indigenous, Black, and other equity deserving groups. One obvious drawback is that the quality of medical practice could be reduced as academic standards for admissions are lowered and as ethnicity and other irrelevant factors are considered instead of ability. I will discuss lower standards shortly. However, since this has been widely discussed and the university's administration has already changed its official policy, I will put it aside for now. Rather, I did a deep dive into another university that has different admissions criteria based on the applicant's ethnicity and indigeneity. Dalhousie University has three different streams: default or open, Black students, and Indigenous students. As we all know, getting into medical school is very difficult, and candidates must work quite hard to be admitted into this prestigious type of institution. The short version of this story, however, is that the applicant's ethnicity and indigeneity can be a major factor at Dalhousie. Specifically, the requirements for the GPA and MCAT are quite different. GPA means grade point average, and MCAT means medical college admission test, which assesses your knowledge of natural and social sciences concepts and your critical thinking and scientific problem solving skills required to begin the study of medicine. It's notoriously difficult, by the way, with the MCAT taking 6 hours and 15 minutes and Dr. Shemason recommending 300 to 400 hours of study time. Under the open stream at Dalhousie, residents of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island must obtain a minimum GPA of 3.3 out of 4, or 82.5%. Residents of all other Canadian provinces and territories must obtain a minimum GPA of 3.7 out of 4, or 92.5%. Can you guess what the minimum score is for Black and Indigenous students? There is no minimum GPA requirement. And what about the MCAT, that notoriously difficult test that plays a key role in medical school admissions? Well, Black students must have completed the test within the past 5 years, but no MCAT thresholds are required. Along similar lines, the MCAT is considered an optional requirement under the Indigenous admissions pathway because it poses a significant barrier for many Indigenous applicants. The truth is that both GPA and MCAT requirements are indeed significant barriers for applicants, and they are enforced to only admit the brightest and most academically successful students. By contrast, here are the requirements in the open stream for residents of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island. And here are the requirements in the open stream for residents of all other Canadian provinces and territories. It's not an exaggeration to say that in Canada, University admission standards are different according to the applicant's ethnicity and indigeneity. That is certainly the case at Dalhousie University. Now, I have a personal story to share before wrapping up part one of employment equity in Canada. I was on the hiring committee at a department in the Government of Canada, and we were creating a pool of fully qualified communications officers. My manager and I established the criteria for the position, met with around 100 candidates in multiple information sessions regarding the positions, and discussed how we expected the selection process to take place. The issue of employment equity came at the direction of our director, who stated that diversity was a priority and that we wanted the selection process to be more representative. Upon further questioning, the director told us that we were to evaluate all candidates according to the selection criteria, then rank them according to their score. To keep things simple, let's say that everything went smoothly and that we established the minimum threshold at 80%. Logically, you would think that the most qualified person would be offered a position first, then the second most qualified person, etc. However, our director clearly stated that because we did not have enough Black employees in our directorate, we would hire all the qualified Black candidates first, then move on to the other candidates. In other words, a Black candidate who scored 80% would be hired before candidates of another ethnicity, even if there were 20 who received between 81% and 100%. This is just scratching the surface on employment equity in the Government of Canada, honestly. Because this was an information dense topic, I decided to make multiple videos for the sake of clarity. Feel free to add your comments and questions below because I may take them into consideration for part two. Also, I appreciate if you like, subscribe, and share. That's it for part one of employment equity in Canada.